Good evening and welcome to Ebenezer. We're so excited you've decided to join us for our Wednesday night family ministries. We're about to begin, but before we do, we wanted to remind you of a couple of things. First, our church website, EbenezerPHC.com, houses lots of great information. Follow and like our social media channels. We have Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube pages. And lastly, our family ministry dinners begin at 5 o'clock, and we'd love for you to join us. All right, let's start.
For me, I might call it theology shaking, but it's more like theology fine-tuning, if you will. And I think you'll see what I'm talking about. I've brought the purple cow back tonight because there's a little bit different thing going on. For those that may not be aware, the purple cow is a terminology that's used in the advertising industry for something when you think out of the box, when it's something out of the ordinary, those kind of things, and it's stretching your understanding. So we have a purple cow that might start dancing around here in a little bit. We'll see. We'll see. So if you could put the parable up there, the first screen, the title for this parable is The Unworthy Servant. I prefer calling it the obedient servant, but we will see what it's talking about. The unworthy servant does not mean worthless. Sometimes we gravitate that way when we talk about unworthy. It has nothing to do with worthless. And we're going to see what unworthy means. I have the easel here tonight. We're going to, hopefully this will help reinforce what I'm going to present to you tonight. Anyway, if you go back to that first screen, there's two questions on here. Question number one, what do you feel God owes you? And question number two, what truth have you learned to motivate you in serving the Lord? These are two questions that you may have answers for now. And as we go through this lesson, when we get to the end, I'm going to bring these questions back up. And let's see if anything has fine-tuned, has changed in your answer to these questions. So we'll see where that takes us. So let's go to the next screen. 6, 7. Thank you. Does everybody know what this is? I'm with you. I had no clue, totally in the dark, and I read, this is the 2025 Word of the Year. And I have never heard it. And it's not a word. That's our culture. 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7. 6, 7. But never 67. So I have grandkids, and I've never heard this. And after I heard about it, I asked them, I said, sure, they know exactly what it is. Everybody knows what it is but me. It comes with hand gestures. 6, 7. I hope you can read that. Feel free to come closer if you can't, because there's going to be more writing on the easel tonight. So These 6-7 is where it all started from, in around March of 2025, and along with it, we now have some additional terms that are along the same line. 41, anybody heard of 41? There's another one, the technical term is Cindy. And it's not C-I-N-D-Y, it's S-E-N-D-Y. And most people just say Cindy. Heard of that one? Thank you. So, dictionary.com, this is the 2025 word of the year. USA Today reports that if you're not up to speed on this year's slang, you may be puzzled by the outcome. The word is a set of numbers, a slang term that is essentially nonsensical, which means it makes no sense. Totally no sense. And it has no fixed meaning. 6-7. Some young people will use it to stand in for a reply to just about any question that they get. For example, your child comes home from school. How was school today, darling? 6-7. And that's all you get. So, Cindy. Cindy means to go all in, to commit fully to an activity. Usually when teens say Cindy, they do like they're chugging, an alcoholic drink. They're chugging a drink. Or they're wolfing down a burger. That usually comes with the word Cindy. And it means that teens are using this to hype themselves up before doing something fun or challenging. You take that for whatever it means. 41. 41 is the outspur of 6-7. So 6-7 you do this, 41 you do this. Pushing something away. It doesn't matter how you say it as an adult, it's wrong. It doesn't matter. You're going to say it wrong, and even if you say it exactly like the child says it, it's wrong. You cannot say it. You will not never ever be in the clique. It reminds me of in the Bible in Judges chapter 12, the Gileads had the Ephraimites on the run. And the Ephraimites ran across the Jordan River to get away from them. And so they just waited at the Jordan River. And over time, as the Ephraimites would migrate back, trying to get to their homeland, they would have to cross over the Jordan River. And to identify if it was an Ephraimite or not, they asked them to say Shibboleth. And an Ephraimite could not say an SH sound, so it would come out Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth. 42,000 people died that could not say Shibboleth. Coming back across, they identified them that way, and that was the enemy, and they killed them. That is kind of the way this is. You just can't say it, okay? Don't try to be in the trend. Don't try to be in the clique. Just go along with them, okay? You can't say it. So the phrase 6-7 means so-so, maybe this, maybe that, but it also is used as an exclamation, an interjection, and a response, often humorously. Steve Johnson is one of the directors at dictionary.com, and he said, it's part inside joke, part social signal, and part performance. When people say it, they're not just repeating a meme, and that's something else I don't understand, a meme. They're shouting a feeling, a burst of energy that spreads and connects people long before anyone knows what it means. So the crux of the whole thing is this is some means of connection between the young people. Kindergarten teacher Sarah James, not quite ready for all that. We'll get there though. Kindergarten teacher, I'm doing this number, and they don't know if I'm saying go to the next slide or not. Steve Johnson, Sarah James, she's a kindergarten teacher, and she posted a TikTok video. She's teaching the children how to count, and she goes, and they all go together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then she just does this, and they yell out 6, 7, with excitement, because it's a connection for them. So the term has become an inside joke among many of the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha generation. Young people use it as a way to bond, to feel included, and to be connected to their friends. We'll go to the next one. Next slide. The source of 6-7. This is just about as confusing as 6-7 is. It originated in 2024 with a rap song. The phrase that you see here in the rap song, this is what we call the chorus of the song, but that's not what it really is technically in a rap song. It's a rap song. The song name is Doot Doot by a Philadelphia rapper named Skrilla. Sounds like I'm talking a foreign language here. So he says in the song several times, the way that switch, I know he dying, 6-7, I just bit right on the highway. You can tell I'm not a rapper. And if you look at the lyrics to the whole song, I cannot tell one thing that's going on in that song by looking at the lyrics. It's all like this. What is he saying? The way that switch, I know he dying. I didn't look at the whole video, but I looked at enough of it to tell Skrilla is in a car, and he's got this big, like a AK-47 or something. And it's obvious that somebody just got bibbed. No, he just bipped right on the highway. Somebody got shot, okay? I don't know. I don't know. Switch is gone. Okay, thank you. He gets stopped by the police, but he gets let go. So that has something to do with just get bipped right on the highway, I think. I don't know. They asked Skrilla. He's the one that came up with 6-7. It's sitting right there in the song. They asked him, what does it mean? And he said, I don't know. And I think the reason he's saying that is because there is so much interest that's stirred up with everybody trying to decide what 6-7 means, till as long as he doesn't give it an answer, there's still interest out there. And he's getting clicks on his TikTok and everything else, YouTube and all these things. There's thoughts that 6-7 could be the 67th Street in Skrilla's hometown of Philadelphia. There's thoughts that it could be the 67th Street in Chicago, where a lot of gang shooting and stuff goes on. There's also somebody that said that it could mean 1067, which is a police term, police code for to notify of a death. I think that's probably a lot of it right there. 1067 is to notify that there's a death. So he's got the song, the rap, and in March of 2025, the term just exploded, because this is the way the viral stuff goes anymore. There's a blonde-headed, middle-aged boy. He's at an amateur basketball game, and he gets in front of a camera, and he does 6-7. And it just went viral. So now we have the word of the year, 6-7, a number. Dictionary.com commentary says, the humor and popularity of 6-7 comes from its lack of inherent meaning and its use as an absurd shared reference point among young people. It is connected to a condition that is being labeled, get this now, is connected to a condition being labeled in pop culture as brain rot, caused by being constantly online, scrolling endlessly, and what are we left with in the wake of this relentless sensory overload? Things like 6-7. So with that in mind, 6-7 is the totally opposite of what we're looking at in our parable tonight. The parable, and we can go to the next slide, the parable is the unworthy servant. And to go into the parable, I want to get the context, because this is so important for this parable. And we get the context from these verses we see here, verse 5 and 6, then we go into the parable. And this is what the context says. In Luke 17, 5 and 6, the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. So the Lord said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be pulled up by the roots and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Now, I put this up here also in the Message Bible, and I put it in red because this is so crucial. We've all asked this question. We've all desired this from God. Just increase my faith. Give me more faith, God. And look at how Jesus answers this in the Message Bible in verse 6. He says, you don't need more faith. There is no more or less in faith. What he's saying is that, he's given this example of if you just got a grain of faith, you can have a tree plucked up and thrown into the lake. So you don't need any more. What you have is sufficient. Now that's mind-blowing. We all think we need more faith. We have all we need. If we utilize everything we have, it's sufficient for everything that comes our way. We are created in the image of God, and that image entails a measure of faith. No matter how small or how great you think your measure of faith is, it's sufficient to move mountains. It's enough, and it's yours. So guard it, protect it, use it well. Wear it out if you can. If you can. So now, the disciples have asked, increase our faith. So the subject matter is centering around faith. Now let's go to the next slide and look at the parable, the unworthy servant. When a servant comes in from plowing or taking care of sheep, does his master say, "Come in and eat with me"? No. He says, "Prepare my meal, put on your apron, and serve me while I eat. Then you can eat later." Now let's catch up with what's going on here. The servant has been out in the field plowing all day, working in the field, or either tending to the sheep, and then that part of the day is over with. They come inside, and the master sits down and says, "Now prepare me a meal, and you serve me, and when I'm finished, then you can go eat something." Let's go on. And does the master thank the servant for doing what he was told? Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. That's what he says. In the same way, when you obey me, you should say, this is where the title comes from, "We are unworthy servants who have simply done our duty." So there's a lot to unpack here in the fact that it seems almost unfair for this servant to work all day in the field, then come in, then have to tend to the master, and then he can finally sit down and eat something. And on top of that, he doesn't get a thank you. There is no thanks for this. You've simply done your duty. Number one theology impact statement on this parable. We read this parable understanding that Jesus is answering the disciples about faith. They said, "Increase our faith." But it doesn't seem like there's a straightforward answer here in the parable. They're asking for faith. Jesus says, "You have enough," and then he gives this parable. But how is he talking about faith here in this parable? In the parable, he's talking about the duty and the work of the servant. So what's going on there? This brings us full circle to what we have talked about before with James 2:17, where it says, "Faith without works is dead." It's like they're intermingled, they're intertwined, and Jesus just naturally starts talking about duty and work when he's talking about faith. It's so interrelated till this is faith. Our faith is our work, and it's all interrelated. Theology statement number 2. The master doesn't thank the servant for doing what is expected. It sounds harsh to us. We, employer relationships and things like this, we expect appreciation for our work. But in this parable, perhaps because of the culture, the master-the servant relationship, there's no accolades, there's no thank you, there's no appreciation for doing your duty, for doing what's expected of you. There's a lot to learn there when we understand that the parable is talking about the servant and the master, the Christian and God. Is it possible that there's a lot of work that we don't have to get a thank you for? That's a little jolting, just doesn't sit right. No thank you? A thank you would be a measure of grace. He said in the parable that you're simply doing your duty. When you're doing your duty, there's no need for a thank you. And if you got a thank you, it would be a measure of grace because you're doing something that you didn't earn when you got the thank you. I hope that made sense. John Calvin, he has a quote about this parable. The object of the parable is to show that all the zeal manufactured by us in discharging our duty does not put God under any obligation to use by any sort of merit, for as we are his property, so he on his part can owe us nothing. We just do it, and we don't need a thank you for doing our duty. So we know all this, but it's a little bit sobering, and it's a little bit jolting, and I've been living this with this for a couple weeks, but you're just now hearing it, so I understand it's going to take a little while to digest this. We think, after all my years of service, I deserve better than to grow old and get sick. God, you ought to be listening to me, and you ought to see what I'm doing, and you ought to, not let me suffer like this. We're doing our duty. And there's no thank you for the duty. It still feels jolting, doesn't it? So the message is similar to what we learned in the parable about the workers in the vineyard. All the workers got the same pay, but some worked 8 hours, some worked 6, 4, and some worked only 1 hour. And yet they all got the same pay. It's the same thing going on here. We do our duty, and we get our pay. We get, can we say, heaven for our duty, but you don't need a thank you in the midst of that. It goes back to, I think it was my last lesson when I was talking about Jubilee economics. The whole idea that God's economy is driven by grace and not by merit. It's a whole different concept. Let's go to the next slide. So we're going to, we were in English class just a moment ago when we were getting the word of the year that was a number. Now we're going to go to math class, and we're going to go to math and have letters. Hope y'all like algebra. The obedient servant. When I began studying this parable, God said, write it down. And I said, write what? And as I began understanding that when Jesus told the parable, he's talking about the works in answering to the faith. The faith and the works were intertwined together. And so I went to James 2:17, and it says, faith without works is dead. And that's where I began to start writing this down. The fact, and this is a major concept, the fact that our faith and our works are co-joined together. We see Jesus answering a question about faith with works. They're so co-joined together, they're so intertwined till there is no separation between the two. But yet we think there is a separation between the two. And we're going to look at that. Let's go to the next slide. So we have C here. C was going to represent our crowns. our rewards. When we get to heaven, that's what the sea represents. This is the goal. What every Christian in living wants is heaven. We want that crown. We want that reward of heaven. So that's what the sea represents, our heavenly home. So now we want to go to the other side of the equation. What determines the crown and the rewards? And so, yes, we have this next slide here, and we're going to look at the FW first. Well, before we get to that, just to help us understand a little bit more about the crowns, could we speculate on what maybe our crowns would look like when we get to heaven? The reward that we get when we get to heaven. We see artwork and we see images of things and all that, you know, we don't really know, but we like to vacillate in those realms. Is it possible that we'll have halos when we get in heaven, and the size and the brightness of our halo will represent the rewards that we earned here on earth? Or maybe we have badges that are placed on our righteous garments. Maybe there's sashes that go around our righteous garments, and these indicate the rewards that we earned. Maybe it's gems on our crown. I don't like to use this term, but, you know, tattoos, but maybe it's kind of like a tattoo where, you know, in the Bible it talks about the scripture and the word is stamped on your forehead and on your hands. Maybe it's something in that realm where we can identify our crowns. There's a lot of ways to look at that, and we're just going to leave that there for the sake of time. So let's go to the next slide there. The faith and the works, the FW in this formula. So we have the verse here, James 2:17. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. My first impression when I wanted to write this down is F plus W. F plus W. And when I started to analyze this, F plus W does not pass what I call the zero test. What I mean by that is if we use a 1 if it's present, and we use a 0 if it's missing. So we have faith, we don't have works. 1 plus 0 is 1, right? This is not scriptural. For Scripture, this, one without the other, plus 1 without the other should be dead. Follow me? So this is not scriptural. The big jolt about this is that this is the way we always look at the scripture, James 2:17. We say, faith without works is dead. We have two columns. We have our faith column, we have our works column, and we think of it as a summation of the two. We got our faith, and I'm going to add my works to it, and it's going to be alive. It's not going to be dead. But when we look at it this way, a summation doesn't work. It's not scriptural. So now, time, F times W. This passes the zero test. We know that anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So if I don't have faith and I have works, it's dead. If I have faith and I don't have works, it's 0. This is the way you would write that scripture if you were going to write it in an equation. F times W. What this reinforces is what we see in the parable. We see Jesus explaining faith, and then he goes right into a parable about works and duty. It's intertwined, it's co-joined together, never to be separated. But yet when all this time, when we've looked at faith and works, we've looked at them as separate and we add them together. You can't do that. When you have faith as a Christian, you are automatically co-joined with your works, and it will be evident in your life. It's not a separate thing. It's co-joined together, intertwined together, never to be separated. Hope that makes sense. When we look at this, let's go a little further. Next slide. When we look at this in the Message Bible, and I've got the whole parable up there in the Message Bible, but we want to zone in on the last verse there for purposes here. The last verse says, when you've done everything expected of you, be matter of fact and say, the work is done. What we were told, we did. Jesus is teaching about faith, and he's showing that the work is an unthanked obligation. It's a duty. It's proving our faith. The servant did his duty, the things that is expected of him, which is, like we heard Sunday when we're talking about the sanctity of life, the verses talked about each one of us are created with a plan and a purpose. That plan and that purpose is what brings us to our duty and our work and our obligation as a Christian. Our Christian jobs are what we are created to do. And we expect to thank you for doing it, but Jesus in the parable is telling us, don't expect to thank you. This is your obligation. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you were created for. I say this humbly as an example. Myself, I play the piano and I teach. And those are two high-profile positions, if you want to look at it like that. But in no way at all is there any accolades, is there any thank yous, is there any gratitude or anything like that, because all it is my duty, my plan and my purpose and my duty before God. And I don't expect anything for it, and we shouldn't. Whatever your job is, that is your duty. That is your job. And it's matter of fact. Say the work is done, and what we were told to do, we did. Plain and simple. So a review of the FW. You and I can't compare ourselves and think one is doing more than the other. We simply do the plan and the purpose for which we were created. It's our obligation to simply do the plan and purpose for which we are created. the unworthy servant, this helps. When you just read the parable and you see the title, The Unworthy Servant, it kind of makes you wonder where the title came from. But this now gives us a full appreciation for the title, The Unworthy Servant. Because the unworthy servant is an obedient servant, and they're doing what they are told to do without any accolades, any thanks at all. Another way to look at it, this is Faith Commitment Month, and we focus on missionaries. And often we think, the sacrifice these people do, and they do. They're sacrificing a lot to go on the field. But they're doing the plan and the purpose for which God created them. It is their duty. It is their obligation. It is a matter-of-fact thing. The work they do is because they were told to do it. And it's a little jolting, like I say. There's no thank you for that. So, we hopefully by now we can see that we always thought there was a faith column, there was a works column, and we could add them together, and that would decide if we were dead or not. Now, there is no faith and works column. The faith and the works are joined together, intertwined, co-joined, with nothing in between them. So now let's look at the next part of the equation. If you want to go to the next slide, the 1 plus the E. I put up here on the screen in the amplified version of the Bible, the last verse, so we can appreciate the next part of this. Because so far, it's like I say, it's a little jolting because I haven't talked about anything that's a reward yet. Now we're going to look at that. This is what in the Amplified Bible, this is what it says. We are unworthy servants, undeserving of praise or a reward. For we have not gone beyond our obligation. We have merely done what we ought to do. Thus far, when we look at the parable, that the servant hasn't gone beyond his obligation. So here's an interesting proposal. Our obligated service is not worthy of praise or reward. That leads us, based on this amplified version of the Bible, to understand or to ask the question, what is worthy of praise and reward? It's when we go beyond what we were created to do. It's when we go beyond the duty and the work and the obligation that God has put in our life. This is the extra. This is the excellence. How do we write this? So I started with, we have faith and works. No. This is what I started with. Faith and works plus E. Plus our extras. It's kind of like we think of it the same way we thought of faith and works. It's in columns, and we can bring it over and we can add it to to our faith and our works. But this fails the zero test. This right here, if a person is not a Christian, if the faith and the works is dead, in this scenario, that person could do something extra for God, and they would, this would be a 1, they would end up with heaven. Does that make sense? A person that is not a Christian could supposedly do something for God and go to heaven if this were the equation. That's unscriptural. That doesn't work. So this is not the way to write it, is what I'm getting at. So, I went to this first one here. Faith works times our extras. This also fails the 0 test. We know anything multiplied by 0 is 0. For the Christian, if we are a Christian and we have a 1 here because we have our faith and our works, and we do no extras, we have a 0, that equals 0. What this is saying is that as a Christian, if I don't do anything extra, I don't go to heaven. That's not scriptural. That's not right. In the parable, he says, you do your duty, you do your obligation. That's this. And we can go to heaven. We are children of God. So this doesn't work either. This is not scriptural. So now we have FW1 plus E. This works. What happens is if you plug the numbers in, if you have faith and you have works, and you have 1 plus, let's say you do no extras, you still get a 1. 1 times 1 is 1 times 1 plus 0 is 1. So 1 times 1 is 1. What this is saying is that you can be a Christian. You can do your obligation. You can do your duty to God and go to heaven without doing any extras. But look at this. What if you were to do an extra? This would be 1 times 1 times 1 plus 1 equals 2. This is a blow your mind kind of thing. The idea that if you do anything extra for God, he doubles it, even tenfold. You cannot outdo God. Whatever you can do just this right here, faith and works, and go to heaven. But if you want rewards and if you want crowns and hierarchy and there's levels in heaven, if you want to gravitate into that, all you have to do is some extra stuff, the things that go beyond your duty to God. What would that look like? Running out of time here. What would it look like if you did extras? Our obligation, let me put it. We were talking about columns. So we have our faith and our works, and we have our extras over here. This is our duty. This is our extras. What does this look like? The duty is in the scripture. You see the servant come in from the field, and he does the meal and serves his master, and the master is satisfied before he ever goes to get his own meal. If we look at that parable and what would be the extras, it would be every once in a while the servant would come in and get the fine china out and maybe light a candle and maybe put some background music on and maybe wear white gloves while he serves the master. And the master looks over at him knowing that he's going beyond his obligation, and the servant puts up a white glove and says, "It's my pleasure to serve you." That's going the extra. For us, it could be, you ever heard this term? Tithes and offerings. Tithes and offerings. This is our obligation, our tithes. Enough said. Our offerings, though, when we saw that when we do extras, it's doubled, tripled, tenfold, you can't outgive God. When we look at that and we look at our offerings, just think what kind of blessings we can get from God just by doing those extras, going beyond the duty that we, at one time, before this lesson, at one time, we thought our obligations and our duties were our rewards, our extras. They're no longer our extras. That's our duty, according to the parable. All those things those positions we have in church, those jobs we do for God, they're not extras. They're what is our plan and purpose for which we were created. And now we're beginning to see that there are extras beyond that we need to be doing. Another way to look at it, church, wait, you can't even read that one, but church and evangelism. Church is what we do inside these walls. Evangelism is what we do outside the walls. That's when we get into the extras. And that's part of the vision of Ebenezer for 2026, going beyond these walls. So I hope this is coming across like it came to me, that there's a whole nother area of extras when we're serving God that we need to tap into. And we, like I say, we will never outgive God. Never. He will always abundantly and above and beyond bless us more than what we can imagine. A little bit of trivia. Is math discovered or invented? Math. You know, we've been looking at algebra tonight. Is math, algebra, discovered or invented? I can appreciate it. Math, let me answer that. Math was discovered. And the reason I say that, the fact that it's discovered means that it was created by God. And man is discovering what God has already put out there. The Pythagorean theorem, Newton's law, multiplication, addition, the intricacies of the orbits and the seasons and the 30s and all these things. We're just discovering what God has already created. So I say that to say that tonight was a purple cow. The idea of taking Scripture and putting it in an algebraic form. But yet, can we not look at it as a discovery of what God has already put out there for us? And just another way of looking at this whole faith and works concept. So I have one other that, if you want to go to the last slide, that is actually what this formula, this equation looks like. When we say go with God, we are looking for our crowns in heaven. We are doing our faith and our works, our duty, and we are doing the extras. And we're going with God. So I wrote it down like this. Our crowns, our rewards, our ticket to heaven is being prepared as we co-join our designated measure of faith with our works, obligations, duties, fulfilling the plan and purpose for which we are created. And we also indulge with excited anticipation in the marvelous generosity of our God as we strive for excellence in doing the extra measures of love for our fellow man that God approves of. Go with God.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope to see you again soon, Sundays at 10 and Wednesdays at 7.